Hi there, welcome. My name is Aaron Michael Kosiba. I'm the Euphora Color Technical Director. Thank you for joining us today. What I'm here to talk to you today about is change. We know as hairdressers, it's always important that we focus on changing our guests, and it's never more important than really to focus on change as we start to move into a new season. So I'm excited to share with you today our Marsala Melange color palette. Marsala based on Marsala wine collection, and Melange meaning to blend, combined together allows us to work with a color palette of really rich, beautiful, warm red tones. The inspiration, as I said, from this was brought from the region of Marsala in Italy. And Marsala wine is actually classified into three different categories based on the tones to that wine. The first one is called Oro. Oro are beautiful, rich, warm, golden tones. We're going to move from there on to Ambra. Ambra are gorgeous, amber colors that can be also added into our formulations. And finally, we like to work with our Rubino. And Rubino are beautiful ruby red tones that are nice and rich and deep and vibrant. So those are the different color palettes that we're going to be working with today on our wonderful model, Rachel. The design of what we are focusing on for this actual placement as part of this collection is we're going to be using really curved lines based on the round shape of Rachel's head. And what that allows us to do is it's going to give our color placement actually a bit of a diffuse, soft dimension. So how we're going to be working as we go forward is we're going to actually apply her overall base color on. From there, we're going to go through and isolate three different teardrop shapes to the top of her head. One starting on the top point, working back to just about the high point of the head. The important thing to keep in mind is as we're applying it, we're going to leave a good 1.5 to 2 inch ribbon or veil right along her hairline out, because we want the deeper color of her base to really kind of frame through her face. And then throughout the three teardrops, we're going to be placing another beautiful color that's going to blend throughout with a couple of different foil placements. The colors that we're going to be working with today, her base color is going to be arranged between a level 4 copper with a level 5 intense red. And we're going to add some intensifiers between the red and copper families. And then in those teardrops that I talked about, we're going to be using a little bit of a cooler color. Since we're using dark, deep coppers underneath, we're going to play around with having some fun in those teardrops with more of an intense level 5 red with a level 6 mahogany mixed in with it, and a little bit of that violet intensifier, because we want a little bit of a cooler color. Because as much as we're keeping our two different colors only about a level apart, the difference between the warmth underneath and that cooler tone falling on top is going to be absolutely gorgeous. And inside those teardrops, around the rest of that color, we're going to be placing between 3 and 4 foils in those patterns. And as we get started in a little bit, I'll show you exactly what we're going to work on. With Euphora, we strongly believe in always starting off with a thorough guest consultation. So I asked her some questions on her lifestyle, the maintenance that she's able to handle, because that would really kind of dictate what kind of color pattern I would put on her head. And I went through a whole list of a consultation that us at Euphora use regularly to really ensure a nice, consistent end result for each guest. Once we're done with that, now that we're sitting here, we're actually ready to start to work. Before we go to work, what we're going to do is we're actually going to pre-cleanse Rachel's hair. We're going to work with our Euphora Urgent Repair shampoo, and that's designed to gently clarify her hair, removing any unwanted environmental buildup or minerals from her hair that could have a negative impact on the color. And then after that, we're going to use our Euphora Urgent Repair Replenishing Treatment. That replenishing treatment is one of my favorite go-to products before color, because it has a nice combination of protein and moisture that really help balance the hair out before we start our color service. Okay, so Rachel and I are back. And as I said earlier, what we did is we took her over and we pre-cleansed and conditioned her. And then we double-checked our guest consultation, and we kind of made a little tweak in the formula. We came up with taking the time to do one extra important step. What we actual level was a level 7. And our target goal for her base color is going to end up being right around a 4.5. And as I said, it's going to be kind of like a really rich copper with some red tones to it at that level 4.5. Because that's a good 3.5 levels of deposit, especially with her line of demarcation. She was also kind of a grown out level 7 mahogany with, as you saw earlier, really pale blonde ends. We want to make sure that even though we're going for a really soft dimensional color, that the color took and had real vibrancy. So we did what's called a color priming. We went in with a level 8 red, And we added that with a 7-volume developer that was mixed in a 1:2 mixing ratio. And we applied that quickly and just let it sit on her head for 10 minutes. After that, we just rinsed it out. After doing a color priming, you do not have to shampoo or condition the hair. And you actually don't want to, because we don't want the shampoo or the conditioner with a lower pH to start closing the cuticle of the hair down. So we just rinse it till the water runs clear. We towel dried her hair extremely well. And now this is the part we're at now. So we're gonna add one other ingredient. And I'm gonna use our Euphora Fortify. It's just a strengthening spray. It's one of my favorite things to use pre-color because it is an aloe-based product and it has human hair protein. That human hair protein is gonna go in and help fill in and balance her hair, balance the porosity, and give us a nice even canvas to work on. So we're gonna apply this first. Okay, now we're gonna mix. So I'm gonna be moving over here so we can mix up our colors. Remember the colors I said earlier are a level 4 copper, that's 3/4 of our formula. 1/4 of our formula is a level 5 double intense red. And then I added just a little bit, about a 2-inch ribbon of both a copper intensifier and a red intensifier. As you come over and look in the bowl with me, what you're going to notice is you can notice the intensifiers. Our intensifiers are a combination of direct and indirect dyes, and because of that, you're going to see a bright red and a bright copper in the bowl. Anytime you're working with mixing color, especially if you're going to mix your intensifiers or creative pigments into your color, I recommend that you use a whisk and you pre-blend them or pre-mix them before you add your developers. You're going to get a more even consistency. And it also can eliminate any challenges that if you don't pre-mix your color when you add your developer, how many times have you ever went to put that kind of color on the head and all of a sudden you get an off color because you didn't pre-blend those really intense, vibrant colors well enough. Okay, we're gonna pre-blend our colors. Okay, now we're gonna add the developer. So in my opinion, one of the most important things in any color application or any color service is the application. What I like to pay attention to as I'm applying is I always make sure that I pull my color from the edge of the bowl. I really believe that every time you pull your color straight off of the edge, you get a nice, even, consistent bead of color so that each and every time you're laying the color on the head, it's going to be the same as the time before. So we're going to start by applying to Rachel's new growth. We're going to go through some sectioning and pull out our teardrop shapes that we spoke about. When you're applying, one of the things that we really try to focus on is that we are not overly brushing the hair, that we're laying the color on heavily and evenly, but we're not overly brushing so that we're not spreading it up and creating a band. The sectioning I'm working with is a really basic section, starting with pretty much a center guide, going straight down the back of her head, and then I'm sectioning at the top of ear to top of ear. And then from there, I'm going to decide what section I want to start applying to first, because I'm going to have 4 different quadrants. One of the things I always ask myself, and I ask my guest, is what side do they part their hair on the most? And that typically is if they have one distinct part like Rachel does and she's always on the left, I always color over that section first. It's the section that is exposed most to the elements. They over blow dry that section. And if there's gray coverage or you're looking for a vibrant tone, you want the maximum amount of time of deposit and penetration right there. So that's the section I start on. If there's someone who parts back and forth, one side or the other, I'll go from center across, and then finish both the sections off. So as I said, we're going to start on Rachel's left side. I'm going to move around. Sections we're going to take, we want to make sure they're fairly thin. We're going to apply to both sides, both the top and the bottom. That way it's going to always guarantee that we're getting even saturation of color. No guest likes to go home with the telltale signs of getting their color done. After each quadrant, I recommend using our Clean Skin. These are our aloe-infused biodegradable clarifying wipes. These are great. I can take these and just gently clean any color off her scalp. I'm not using a shampoo towel, which would be hanging in her face and uncomfortable for her. So these are great. Okay, now we're going to repeat the same actions on the other side. Same as the other side. Clean her up again. From here, we're going to move on to the back. And one last side to go. Okay, so now that our basic color is all applied, we're going to go through and start the sectioning for our pattern. The actual look we're going to do is using soft curves over the round of her head to create really diffused dimension. So what we're going to do to utilize that is we're going to work with teardrop shapes. We're going to be placing 3 teardrops throughout her head. The first one is going to be based right off the center top of her head, and then you can decide as a colorist, do you want to make it a little wider so it encapsulates both sides of the part so she can flip her hair back and forth. You also want to take into consideration your guest's head size and thickness and quantity of hair. If someone has a smaller head shape, maybe thinner, finer hair, and you put too large of a teardrop shape, it might actually overwhelm the overall pattern. However, if someone has too large of a head shape and you put something too small on their head, it might not blend and move and give you the actual diffused look that we're really working toward achieving. The other thing that's really important to keep in mind is as we carve out our first shape, as I said earlier, we want to make sure that we pay attention that we leave a good inch to inch and a half of a veil of this darker color right around her hairline. That's going to give us some more of that movement and dimension we were talking about. Okay, I'm going to scoot her around just a little bit. I'm going to decide that I'm going to go about 1.5 inches back, and I want my teardrop to stop just around the high point of the head. So I'm going to start in the center in the front. I'm going to create my teardrop. I'm going to place my finger where I want to end and match them together. Try not to mess your hair up. Same thing on the other side. I'm now going to start by putting my tail comb right at that high point. I'm going to visualize. Okay, so I have the first teardrop. Rachel, you put your head forward. You can see how we're starting with a soft, round shape here, and I'm really focusing on trying to bring this teardrop to a point. Because what the important part of this look is this point is going to connect with the point from the teardrop on this side and the teardrop on this side, and it's important because the darker hair here is going to give us that dimension and movement as these 3 quadrants all move together. Rachel, you can put your head up. We're going to just twist this up out of the way. We're going to take our trusty clip and isolate it. And we're going to carve out the next of the 2 shapes. What I've learned to do when working with this Marsala technique is I'm going to focus next on putting the next 2 in, and I like to have them evenly spaced apart. And what I found in working with this is if I split the head down the middle, it gives me a good guideline on where each of these are going to sit in proportion to the other one. I'm going to start with my point. Carve down. Depending on how deep down you go with your teardrop, is the more dimension you're going to get lower in their hair. So it really depends on what your guest's haircut is. If it's really long or really short or how layered is going to really change the look depending on where you start and stop with your teardrop. Okay, here's our second teardrop. Rachel, you could just gently tilt your head back. You can see we're coming to a point. We have the soft round bottom all the way up. And we're going to isolate that with a clip. And then one last one to go. I'm going to spin Rachel around. So I'm going to start here, and I'm looking over because I want to see right about where that ends. And if Rachel leans back again, we have our last. Our point comes here, and a nice soft round bottom. Okay, we're going to be right back. We're going to go mix up 2 more colors. We're going to come back and get started. So now we're working on putting together our color for inside the teardrop. What that color is going to be, it's a level 5 double red. We're going to be mixing that with a level 6 mahogany. And we'll be adding just a little bit of our red intensifier. I've already pre-blended like we were talking about earlier. And now I'm going to be adding my developer. Okay, so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be working inside of our teardrop shapes. And we're going to be placing between 3 and 4 foil placements on a diagonal angle that's going to allow us to have really beautiful dimension in the hair. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start in the front on Rachel's first teardrop. Because we want to have a maximum amount of dimension on Rachel's color, my first diagonal piece is going to be right starting in the very front of her first teardrop. So I'm going to release this because now I have the plastic wraps isolating most of her hair. And I'm going to decide that I want my diagonal coming off of her part line so it's a little bit more visible. So I'm going to spin Rachel around. And we're going to be working with slices. And I want these slices to actually be a little bit thicker than what we standardly take behind the chair. So one of the tricks that we're going to be working on is as we're taking each and every foil, what you're going to see me do is I'm going to be taking the color and I'm actually going to be preloading it onto the foil because it's a bit of a thicker section. By having some of the color already on the foil, I'm going to guarantee even saturation and penetration. So we're going to go from there. Because we're foiling color in over color, one of the things that I like to do is I like to take my comb and fold the lip of my foil on the inside because as I apply it, later on I'm going to need to be moving these foils around to apply another color. When you do that, you guarantee that the lip doesn't get stuck to other color and the whole foil shifts. So here we go. I'll hold it up off of her face. You see me going in with the side of my brush, and I'm really trying to work the color into the hair. Hold my foil up out of the way, first one's done. So my first foil's in, and as I said before, you can do between 3 and 4 foils per section. So from this spot, I'm actually starting to map out where my next 2 to 3 foils are going to go. Paying attention to stay in a diagonal line, and I'm making sure that I'm being conscious that I want to have a thicker slice. Here's my last one in the first section. Two more sections to go. Let's start with one in the back. Release that down. The same thing is we're going to follow diagonal sections and we will be placing 3 throughout. I'm thinking 1, 2, 3 going through this section. Here's her last section. So since we're doing a diagonal forward here, we're going to mimic the same action of going to a diagonal forward on this side. Okay, here's our last one. Okay, that step is done. What we're going to do now is we're going to refresh the hair in two different ways. We're going to go back to our original teardrops, and that color is going to be refreshed through that area, and then the whole underneath and the ribbons between the teardrops, that's going to be our original color, that darker color of a level 4 copper and that 5 double red. So I'm going to go mix that up and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're going to be mixing our color that we're going to be placing around the foils in the teardrop sections. Our formula was a level 5 double intense red and a level 6 mahogany. And we also added some of the red intensifier, and we've decided to move up and use a 25 volume developer like we were using a 15 earlier. The reason being is it's just going to add a little bit more pop and vibrancy to our color. So once again, that's mixed by equal parts of a 20 and a 30 volume. I have 20 grams of color in the bowl here, so I'm going to add my developer. Okay, here we go. One of the great things to pay attention to is when you're applying two different colors on this same hair, which means we have a little deeper base here and we're using a little bit of a lighter color on the ends. I like to use my fingers kind of in a scissor motion and marry the two colors together so that there's no harsh line of demarcation. Oops. And we're going to work through our last top section. Okay, so all of the color is pulled through the teardrop sections. I'm now going to go grab my end color for the underneath. That was a level 4 copper with a level 5 double red. Also working with our red and orange intensifiers. We'll pull that through the remaining part of the hair, and then she'll process for 35 minutes, and she'll be all done. Be right back. So now we're going to finish our application by just refreshing the ends for the underneath portion that we started with. We're working with that level 4 copper and a level 5 double red with a red and orange intensifier, and we used a 20 volume developer to refresh. So I'm going to start working through Rachel's back. Okay, so we're finishing up. Here's the last section for Rachel. And then before I leave, we're going to recap real quick what we did. So what we've been working on, Rachel, today is part of our Marsala Melange color palette. And as we were talking earlier, that Marsala Melange palette is based in beautiful deep wine notes, working with the Oro, the Ambra, and the Rubino. So basically beautiful gold, ambers, and deep rich red tones. And the actual placement we're working on for this technique was really soft curves based on the round of the head. And our whole goal was to really give really kind of diffuse, defined definition that flows throughout the head. Started off with subsectioning off from our base color, doing a teardrop where the round is in the front of the head and the point comes to the top, and there's 2 more teardrops in the back. And the idea is by sectioning off that way, we're going to be working with those, as she tilts her head forward, the deeper, darker lines that kind of weave their way up into the head. That works out great. Now, one of the reasons that we actually decided on Rachel is to apply a single base color throughout her entire head, instead of doing like a subsection of black coloring where each and every other section has a different color, is for her grow out time. So it's going to be much easier for her to have a touch-up done because it's the exact same base color throughout her entire head, instead of a hairdresser having to go back in and trying to resection where everything was before to get a duplicate look again. So we have her processing. We'll be back in about 35 minutes. Okay, so we're back. Rachel has been finished up. Hopefully you all agree this is a good example why all of our clients need really well-trained colorists. This is not something that you can get out of a box. We had a lot of fun working on it. I hope you like it as much as we do. Let's check her out. Spin her around.